So the first thing that we're going to do with stations is to help them think about what's the real context of their community. What situation, what circumstances are they actually working in? And so we'll help them think about what are the issues that are on the minds of people in their community so that people's realities can be reflected in the work that public broadcasters do. We'll help public broadcasters think about what are the conditions in their communities, what are the conditions that they need to face, and what are the ways in which they can help to build the civic health of their community to address those conditions. And what are the real levers, the strategic levers that they can grab hold of that will create change in trying to help a community to move forward. And so the first thing that we'll be doing with stations is help them think about what is their community context and what does that mean for the kind of work that they do. This is really important because many organizations who are trying to create change in communities actually see themselves at the center of the community, create programs and try to push them out to the community. Public broadcasters have been guilty of that from time to time as well. And so when thinking about community context, one of the key points that we'll be stressing and working on and engaging stations on is thinking about what does it mean to really start with the community and for the station to operate within the context of that community. Second point, what does it mean to authentically engage people? I don't need to tell many of you that we have created an entire industry in our country to try to engage people in their communities, but oftentimes that engagement is merely window dressing. Many times we say to people, we're going to engage you, but actually there's no space for them to come into and to engage. Even when we create those spaces to engage people, we have them come into the room, but we don't actually ask them any questions. We tell them what to think about. When we ask questions, a lot of times we don't leave room for people to answer them, and when we do, we often don't even listen to their responses. And when we listen to their responses, many times those responses never get brought back into the work of the station, back into the work of the organization that's doing the engagement, and actually is not reflected in the ongoing work of the community itself. So here's what we're going to do in this initiative around authentic engagement. First, we're going to work with the stations to help them figure out what are the issues that people are really concerned about in their community, and importantly, where on those issues is the community starting. We often jump into the conversations with communities at a point at which way ahead of where the community actually is, so that we want to figure out where does the community start on this issue and what's the path that the community needs to take in order to really engage with that issue and to make progress. We'll also think about the pathways that people need in order to engage with that issue in their own lives. Where in the community do people go to engage on issues? Where do they get information and knowledge from? Who do they trust to get that information and knowledge from? What are the pathways they need to take so that we don't simply put one community point out there and expect everyone to come to it, but that we can actually go and meet people where they are and find them in the pursuit of their own lives. So authentic engagement is the second point that we'll work on with stations. Third is impact. Impact. You know, when I work across the country, people often say to me, Rich, we can't measure our impact on this civic work because it's the equivalent of God's work. It's way too important to measure. And it's way too sophisticated and complex to measure. And what I say back to them is this: if you think that work is so important, if you think it's so necessary, if you think it's so needed, then don't we have an obligation to determine whether or not we're actually making a difference? Don't we have an obligation to see whether or not we're really engaging people in meaningful ways? Don't we have an obligation to see whether or not the community is able to move forward given the work that we're doing? Don't we have an obligation to see that our own work, as we try to engage the community, is meaningful and significant and essential? And so in this area, we'll be innovating with the stations that we're working with to figure out what kinds of measures, what kinds of metrics or benchmarks make sense for this work, and how we can create those benchmarks or metrics so that they're realistic, that they make sense, that they're doable, but that we can be held accountable for them. And so with these stations, we'll develop these metrics and we'll start to measure, even in this first initial stage of innovation, whether or not we're making a difference. Fourth point, sustainability. As I talk to stations and I talk to civic groups across the country, one of the things that they're concerned about is we can put on a good project, but how do we ensure that change really comes to the station or the organization that we're working in? The public broadcasters that we've worked with and that we're working with have raised this time and again, and so what we want to figure out is, what does it mean to embed this work in the daily life of a station? What does it mean to change the culture of a station? What does it mean to hold meetings in a different way where we're asking different kinds of questions so that our work can take a different path, so that we can ensure that we're making a real difference in the lives of people in our communities? And so through this initiative, we'll spend a lot of time thinking about how can we sustain these efforts, how can we build business models around them, how can we ensure that they live on beyond just this initiative or any initiative that people undertake in order to improve the civic health of their community. So where will we be at the end of 3 years? There are 3 big results that I want to mention that we're working toward in this initiative. The first one is this. At the end of 2 years, we want to have 12 beacons, these 12 public radio and public television stations we're working with. We want to have 12 beacons of hope and of change around authentic engagement in terms of these stations improving the civic life of their communities and deepening their own local significance in those communities. The beauty of this, or we think the beauty of this, is that each station will look different, their initiatives will look different, the work that they're doing will be different, but that underlying all of this work will be some common principles and some common ideas that drive this work forward, which leads me to the second result that we're looking to create. And that is, from these 12 stations and from the work of the Harwood Institute, we want to create a clear set of ideas, frameworks, and tools that any station, and that in fact every station in the public broadcasting system can grab hold of, can implement in their own community and in their own station so that they can make a difference. Third, we'll be working with the National Center for Outreach, which has a great track record of change and hope in the public broadcasting community, particularly in public television. And now they're working with public radio as well. We'll work with NCO to embed these ideas in their daily work so that they can become the home for the work that we create with these 12 stations over the long term, so that public broadcasting and the public broadcasting system can ensure that there's a life for this project, that there's an ongoing way for people to use these materials, these ideas, frameworks, and tools, and that the necessary support exists within the system to make this real and to make it go. It's an incredible opportunity that public broadcasting has. As I said in the beginning, many people are yearning to come back into public life, to be part of something larger than themselves, to make a difference, to reconnect with others. We have lots of organizations in our communities where all our public broadcasting and public radio and public television stations exist. Many of those organizations are doing great work, but they operate in small niches. Public broadcasting is one of the last organizations left in America that spans boundaries, that has the capacity and the trust and the credibility to bring people together and to do the work that we need, that we need to do to move our communities forward.